Hey everyone, I'm back with another game played by the 14th world champion Vladimir Kramnik against Vassily Ivanchuk. This game was played in the 1995 Intel Grand Prix in Paris, and this was a rapid game. This game highlights some of Kramnik's traits. He has a pretty aggressive style and he is often willing to fight for the initiative. So Kramnik had white in this game. He opened with knight f3, knight f6 from Ivanchuk, c4 going for the English opening. We have g6, knight c3. Here Ivanchuk goes d5, knight takes e4, knight takes c3. So now we have a position resembling a Grunfeld defense. Kramnik grabs the center with d4, c5 trying to undermine white's center, rook to b1 getting out of this dangerous diagonal. So here black castle, we have bishop e2, knight c6 adding more pressure to d4, and here Kramnik goes d5, the most challenging continuation, inviting bishop takes c3, which was played by Ivanchuk. So here white went bishop to d2, and black is forced to give up this important dark square bishop. And Kramnik is hoping to take advantage of the dark square weaknesses around black's king. So here knight to a5. In this position, white can castle and play down a pawn, but he has a pretty strong center. Instead, here Kramnik decides to play h4, the most aggressive and challenging try for the advantage. So there was a game played previously between Shevchenko and Svidler, played in 1993, where Svidler went f6. And the idea is to meet h5 with the move g5, but this sort of invited Shevchenko to sacrifice his knight. The game continued king h8, h6, rook to f7, defending mate on g7, bishop h5, queen g8, takes, bishop takes rook, king takes bishop, resulting in a better endgame for white as black's pieces lack coordination. And Shevchenko went on to win this game. But in the actual game between Kramnik and Ivanchuk, Ivanchuk played bishop to g4. Kramnik pushed on with h5. If black were to take this pawn, then Kramnik's idea was to go g4. And if bishop takes, now queen to h6, threatening mate on h7, so bishop h5 kind of forced, but now knight g5, and black has no defense for the mate on h7. So here Ivanchuk took the knight, bishop takes f3, and g takes f3. If white played bishop takes f3, then black will go knight c4, eyeing this juicy square, and if queen c3, trying to prevent that, then black can play queen a5, and this takes this thing out of the position. So in this position, g takes f3 played by Kramnik, the best move in the position, taking away the square from the knight. So here black played e5. If Kramnik were to take en passant, then Ivanchuk will gladly trade queens, and he will live to tell the tale. So after e5, black is hoping to open up some defenses on the 7th rank by meeting h takes g6 with f takes g6. And now queen to h6 can be met with moves like queen e7 or queen c7. So instead of going for this queen to h6, Kramnik plays the challenging d6, posing difficulties for black along this a to g8 diagonal. Ivanchuk played b6, protecting c5. Kramnik continued with queen d5 check, king g7, queen takes e5, giving white two connected passers, and here queen f6 from Ivanchuk. If he were to play, for example, rook to f6, then Kramnik would most likely play rook d1, getting behind the pawn, and after something like knight c6, queen to h2, threatening this pawn on h7, and after h5, e5, white has a big initiative with these central pawns. So after queen e5 check, queen f6, probably the best try for Ivanchuk, offering a queen trade and maybe trying to put some pressure along the f-file. And maybe on a good day, black can try and get this knight to d4 to put some extra pressure on f3. Kramnik, of course, declines the queen trade. He plays queen to h2 to keep the initiative. h5 by Ivanchuk, and now rook d1. Very logical move, getting behind the pawn. So Ivanchuk should have probably played knight c6, aiming for the d4 square, but for some reason he didn't go for this. White's best move is queen g3, just giving more protection to f3, and also threatening rook takes h5 because the pawn is pinned. Black can continue knight d4, knight takes f3. So at the end of this line, it seems to be an endgame that only white can win, but this is still better than what happened in the actual game. In the actual game, Ivanchuk went knight c4. So if queen g3, then knight e5, rook takes h5. This leads to the line we have seen earlier, but after the move knight to c4, Kramnik can just take the knight. Ivanchuk, of course, wins back the piece with queen to c3 check, king f1, queen takes c4, king g2, but it seemed that Ivanchuk misjudged this position. Black's queen is a bit misplaced, and it's kind of needed to protect the black king. Black can maybe try to bring the queen back, say queen to f7, but that doesn't really justify knight c4 a couple of moves back. So Ivanchuk continued with rook a to d8. Now Kramnik played queen e5 check, king to g8, and now rook d5. Beautiful centralization of the major pieces, and this move also cuts off the black queen. So now white is simply threatening to bust open the king side with rook takes h5. For example, if queen takes a2, then you can sacrifice the rook, queen g5 check, and this leads to mate in a few more moves. So after the move rook d5, Ivanchuk played rook to f7. So now the sacrifice doesn't work because queen g5 is met with the move rook g7, and here black wins. So after rook f7, Kramnik just plays rook h3, very calm. The threat is simply to play rook g3, and Ivanchuk is actually completely helpless in this position. The game continued with rook d to d7. Kramnik played rook g3, eyeing g6, rook g7, and now Kramnik finishes off the game with the simple queen e6 check. And in this position, Ivanchuk resigned. White is hitting the g6 pawn twice, and if king h7, then rook takes h5, opens up an attack on the queen. And if rook blocks, let's say rook d to f7, then d7 followed by d8 queen, and this is fatal. I hope you enjoyed this very entertaining game from Vladimir Kramnik. Thanks for watching and see you soon.